Government's General Election Manifesto made the following commitment to make sure that every vote counts the same, a cornerstone of democracy. And the Government's right. Our votes do not count the same. In December, it took 33 times as many votes to elect a Green MP as to elect an SNP MP. 33 to 1. That is a staggering inequality right at the heart of our electoral system. So I'm very much in favour of making each vote carry the same weight, and it seems that members across this House do agree that democratic equality is a matter of importance. But to properly combat that, the only response is electoral reform. But I'll leave that debate until next week and my time with the Minister then. What the Government really means by making every vote count the same is to tighten the boundaries for constituencies so that there's the same number of potential voters in each one. And in principle, this sounds like it would make sense. But the Government's plans do not achieve this. They are proposing to base the boundaries on the number of people on the electoral roll. But that is not the same as the number of potential electors. Indeed, the Electoral Commission estimates that up to 9 million potential electors are not currently on the electoral roll. And as we know, this marginalises groups for whom there are structural difficulties in getting onto the electoral roll. I'm hopeful that the Government will consider using the December 2019 electoral roll. We should take advantage of the fact that the upcoming electoral events encourage people to register and to be enfranchised. We should promote this engagement with our process. There's an obvious solution on all this, which is automatic voter registration. I do not see why the Government refuses to pursue it. Perhaps they are following their instincts. Now, the single most important argument for first past the post, and indeed I think this is the reason why many members fail to look at electoral reform in the way that I do, is that members represent identifiable local communities. And I think that members will agree that we cannot achieve a sense of local representation, then the idea of a one-member constituency is undermined. Now, as someone who advocates a proportional voting system, if I was going to design a flaw in first past the post, I think it would be this. Create rules so stringent that MPs represent random chunks of the country and so delicately responsive that a tiny change in one part of the country will lead to a ripple effect spreading from constituency to constituency and meaning completely new boundaries every 8 years. And I agree that basing the building blocks of seats on wards leads to shotgun constituencies. My own constituency boundaries splits the High Street and Leven in North East Fife, but at least it is all in Fife Council. And I've hugely valued during the COVID pandemic engagement with NHS Fife and Fife Council, and my constituents have too. One final issue I wish to comment on is that of overseas electors. One of the Government's manifesto promises is to abolish the 15-year rule on the eligibility of overseas electors, and presumably legislation will be brought forward over the coming session. They will be able to vote in the next general election, but whether the date of the electoral register used for the boundary review is this year or last, they will not be on it. My colleague, Lord Wallace of Saltaire, has tabled written questions asking the Government to estimate what the number of overseas electors is, and there is no estimate. We are walking blind into this. We are putting restrictive percentages in place now and then adding in an unknown number of voters at a later point, completely undermining what the Government is trying to achieve. And as I touched upon earlier, the incredibly sensitive flexibility conditions will create further upheaval. So I return to where I started. The Protect Our Democracy section of the Conservative Manifesto. There are a number of commitments in that section. Today's legislation represents the first brick in that wall, but clearly, as the issue with overseas voters illustrates, there are going to be foreseeable problems in terms of what comes after. This might be the first brick, but the wall will end up being unstable. Thank you.